they're going the same way as the fake Conservative Party, who are terrified of being called a name.
Breaking right now, Reform UK mired in a reparations row. This is after Nigel Farage posted on X an interview with one of their senior branch leaders, a guy called Neville Watson, who heads the Enfield division, in the Guardian newspaper, where he supported economic reparations for the unimaginable wrong of slavery. Now, this guy said it had driven a, quote, deep-rooted and sometimes subconscious racism and left a deep, indelible mark on the lives of a people. So I'm really struggling to get my head around this on a whole load of levels, and luckily I'm not the only one. Rupert Lowe, axed Reform MP, posted on X, "Here's a succinct and evidence-based response to anyone calling for slavery reparations from Britain. Sod off. Please feel free to use it as you see fit." Stephen Edgington of GB News wrote, "Big test for Farage and Reform. Assuming they were unaware of this and didn't read the article they tweeted, will he now be expelled from Reform? Or is it just those on the right who are removed for their views on migration and Islam?" And Connor Tomlinson on the issue posted, "Extorting taxpayers for billions to absolve white Brits of collective racial guilt is a much more extreme and reprehensible position than mass deportations for illegal immigrants." Should point out that Rupert Lowe weighed in on that too, saying, "I agree with Connor." And I do really struggle with this. And I know there are people within Reform, very senior people within Reform, that think me talking about this somehow makes me the enemy of the party. And I just say to them, you are so wrong. I am only on the side of this country. And that means we need the right people in power. Power is great, but the Conservative Party proved over the past 14 years that power alone is not enough. We have to have the right people who are determined to do the right thing. That means mass deportations, and that means cutting out this woke mind virus of the idea of reparations, which would bankrupt this country. Now, very unusual to me on a few elements, this whole story. Why is Reform UK encouraging their ethnically diverse candidates to give interviews to The Guardian? Are they really this desperate to become a centre-left party? What is that about? And will they now take action? Because you know there have been so many people booted out of the party simply for saying something I consider a fact, like Tommy Robinson is a political prisoner. They're gone, they're booted, they're forever out. And in this case, what this candidate or what this branch chair said goes very much against Nigel Farage's official policy on reparations, which he outlined on GB News. So let's watch this, and then I'll get reaction from Heritage Party leader David Kurten.
What does Sir Keir Starmer say to Commonwealth countries wanting reparations for slavery past?
No, never. Now, there is an argument for reparations, obviously. I think the French, during the 100 Years' War, I think the raids into Kent and Sussex, the loss of so much. I mean, where do you stop with this? Where do you stop with this? Do you go for reparations against the African black slave traders who sold the slaves to us in the first place? I mean, you know, actually, are we owed reparations from the Portuguese, Spanish, who carried on slaving, and we at a massive cost stopped them doing it? Look, if you give an inch on this, if Starmer shows any weakness on this, even if we might consider it, this will never go away.
So, David, I'm fascinated on your view on this whole story because you have a really interesting past with Nigel Farage too. You were, of course, a very senior guy in UKIP. You were elected to the London Assembly. And like so many people, there seemed to be some sort of fallout with the party. And now you've set up Heritage, which I think you could definitely say is to the right of Reform on the political spectrum. So let's come to your personal story in just a moment. But first, what do you make of the fact that Reform UK now has senior people within the party giving interviews for The Guardian and advocating for slavery reparations, and the party management don't seem to have any problem with it?
It's a very strange thing, and it looks like reform are going in a certain direction. I mean, people have been talking about this for a couple of weeks now, that they're moving towards the centre, and they certainly seem to be doing that when they're not doing anything to stop party officials from speaking to the Guardian, which I regard as the enemy. You know, I don't think I would speak to them, or anyone in the Heritage Party would speak to them, or give them an interview anyway. But certainly, you need to have principles as a party, not just sway with the wind and try to move into a place, you know, to try and get some votes, maybe while annoying your base. I mean, the way I operate with the Heritage Party is we set out our principles first, and reparations will be completely against our principles, because the people who are alive today are not responsible for slavery that happened more than 200 years ago. I mean, it's completely ridiculous to suggest that we should give billions and billions of pounds of British taxpayers' money today, which is not going to make reparations for the people who were alive then. Obviously, it's going to go into the pockets of the wealthy people in these countries that are demanding reparations. And, you know, you obviously see Keir Starmer giving huge amounts of money to Mauritius, as well as giving the Chagos Islands away, which goes along with their philosophy and ideology of making reparations. But it's very, very bad for Britain. So the fact that someone in reform can actually say this, and it doesn't seem that anything's happened to them, nothing has been said by the leaders of the party, shows that, well
Nigel
they
actually
don't have any
posted the
principles.
article.
People can say what they like.
Yeah, and what is interesting to me is how Nigel's principles seem to have changed as well. So World by Wolf on X pointed this out. He wrote, there was a time, and this was a time when you were in UKIP alongside him, David, when Nigel Farage would address political taboos, even if it came with a gasp from a BBC audience. In 2015, he raised the fact that the NHS was treating thousands of foreigners for HIV at great expense to the taxpayer. 2025, Farage has lost the stomach for it. Well, it wasn't actually on the BBC, by the way, but I got the clip. It was on Sly News back in 2015, so this is 10 years ago. Let's watch this.
The fact, and I'm sure the other people will be mortified that I dare to talk about it. There are 7,000 diagnoses in this country every year for people who are HIV positive, which is not a good place for any of them to be, I know. But 60% of them are not British nationals. You can come into Britain from anywhere in the world and get diagnosed with HIV and get the retroviral drugs that cost up to £25,000 per year per patient. I know there are some horrible things happening in many parts of the world, but what we need to do is to put the National Health Service there for British people and families who in many cases have paid into this system for decades.
Now, I mean, you just wouldn't catch him saying that these days, would you?
No, I remember that actually from the 2015 general election campaign. I think I watched that debate. And, you know, that was why I joined back in the day, you know, before I started the Heritage Party, because UKIP back in the day was the party that was fighting political correctness and saying what needs to be said and speaking truth, truths that other people were frightened to speak about. But now it doesn't seem like anyone in the leadership of reform is willing to do that. You know, they're rowing back from controlling our borders properly, you know, which is one of the very, very most important things that needs to be done in this country. So, you know, you wonder where on earth they're going. And the thing is, as I've said, if you don't have principles and you rely on polling to determine your policy and to determine what statements you're going to make to the media, well then, you know, you can say one thing today, you can say another thing tomorrow, and a completely different thing the next day, and eventually no one actually knows what you really stand for, and they'll become, you know, just like the Liberal Democrats or something.
But first, don't eat breakfast until you learn about caloric bypass. Your breakfast is setting you up for the entire day to either gain weight or lose it. The term breakfast literally means to break your fast that you started the night before. About 4 hours after you eat dinner, your body switches from the nutrients we get from food to the stored glycogen we have in our body. Once glycogen stores are depleted, typically after 8 to 12 hours of fasting, the body shifts to burning fat for energy. Fatty acids are released from fat stores where they are converted into ketone bodies through a process called ketogenesis. Then, when you eat breakfast in the morning, the body starts the cycle again. This is where the caloric bypass comes into play. Dr. Gundry, a heart surgeon in California, learned that if you break your nightly fast with something called MCTs, or medium chain triglycerides, you can actually keep burning fat throughout the day and use it for energy. But there are specific types of food that contain these MCTs. Using this breakfast breakthrough, he was able to lose 70 pounds just through diet, and he did this in his 60s. You can find out all about it and his exact method by going to thehealthyfat.com/outspoken. That's thehealthyfat.com/outspoken, or you can click in the link in the description box below, or use the QR code if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble. Now, it is important to remember that everybody's body processes fat differently, and it all depends on your unique metabolic type, which is why in this video he released for my special viewers, he talks all about it. It really is quite fascinating. It may even change the way you think about your health. So go to thehealthyfat.com/outspoken or click on the link in the description box below. But now, back to the show. So tell me about your personal experience, David, because obviously we've heard loads of people talk about the fact that Nigel in some way sort of maybe derailed their career or ruined their political career. That there's a whole load of people, and when those folks saw the same thing happen to Rupert Lowe, and I think for a lot of people, for me, that was a bit of a line in the sand. Like, I don't believe that our side of the argument should ever be operating with the type of lawfare and the calling the police for hurty words. That's what we expect the left to use on us, right? So what personally happened between you and Nigel, and do you think he's capable of bringing together people who are really talented and at times might threaten him?
Well, I always got on very well with Nigel Farage, but I
Me too.
played dumb in a way
personally.
because personally I did.
Me too.
But I realized that very early on, if you were a tall poppy, if you like, if your head rose up and you were seen to be intelligent or very capable, then you're going to get chopped down. Within the UKIP structure which I was in from 2014 up to 2019. Then UKIP sort of disintegrated after the referendum, and Nigel went away, essentially, came back with the Brexit Party, but they didn't want me. I offered myself as a candidate for the Brexit Party, but I just didn't hear anything back from them. And I heard that, other people who were figures in UKIP got the same kind of treatment back in the day. They put themselves forward to be candidates, but they weren't selected. I mean, with me, I just didn't hear anything, even though I'd offered to do that for the country, to stand in the general election. I mean, in 2019.
And this seems to be this constant idea, which we're experiencing now, which is almost that Nigel wants to disassociate himself with people who might be considered on the hard right, the far right of British politics, whatever that means. And by the way, that term is so ludicrous now because it's really overused.
Yeah, well, you've got radical feminists now are called hard right or far right.
J.K. Rowling.
Ridiculous because they're quite on the left, really. but yeah, I think you're getting this. Quite a lot. They're looking for people, I think, to be candidates who will, very much be, passive and docile and do what they're told. And if someone is a candidate who's got strong opinions, and I've been called all the names under the sun. I've been called a homophobe, a transphobe, an Islamophobe, and an anti-Semite at the same time, which I don't quite get. A racist, far right. I've been called all of those things. But I think that they're going the same way as the fake Conservative Party, who are terrified of being called a name. And, you've shown the clip of me questioning Sadiq Khan in the chamber of the London Assembly about grooming gangs. And no one else would do that in the London Assembly. But I'll tell you what happened after that session. two or three of the fake conservatives came up to me afterwards and said, "That was brilliant, David. That was such good questioning. I loved it. So good. Couldn't do it myself, but you were great. Keep on doing it." And so, they loved the questions that I was asking, but they wouldn't do it themselves. And it seems like
No,
Reform are
but
now
I'm so
going down the
sick of
same
that.
path.
I'm so sick of that. Okay, so I'm so with you there, but let me put the other position to you, which we had June Slater on the show advocating for yesterday. It's gone really viral amongst a lot of Reform supporters, which is that, Dan, if you are too morally pure and if you try and create something that isn't connected to Nigel Farage, it's simply just going to mean another 5 years of Labour. And let's be honest, the country won't survive that.
No, I disagree with that. I mean, I started the Heritage Party in April 2020. That's when I started working on it, and we launched 6 months later. And that was at a time when everything in the space that UKIP used to occupy closed down. UKIP had disintegrated, the Brexit Party had deactivated. So I just started what I thought we needed as a country, which was a properly socially conservative party, which was like what the Conservatives used to be 30 or 40 years ago, with principles that everybody can understand, financial responsibility, traditional family values, low immigration, national sovereignty, all of those things, which most people would agree on. And so if you have a party that is like Reform, as it's come to be fairly big because they are a PR machine. They get people in the mainstream media. I guess they have PR agents that help them to do that. But you don't have any principles, then what do you stand for? You get into power and you're just like the Uniparty. That's no good. What I think we need is something like the Heritage Party. Well, I would say the Heritage Party itself, because what I'm trying to do is lead on things. And not everyone might agree with everything at the beginning, but I think by putting the message out that this is what the country needs, for example, on net zero and energy security, energy self-sufficiency, that's one thing that we say, which all of the other parties in the Uniparty completely disagree on. But we've stated that from the very beginning 5 years ago. And now many, many millions of people have come over to agree with us and see
But don't you all need to
why
get
we need
together,
that.
though, in some way? Because we've got Rupert Lowe considering what he's going to do. We've got Ben Habib setting up the Integrity Party. We've got UKIP under Nick Tenconi. Now, that is a very, very splintered environment. That's before I get to a whole load of other parties. So doesn't there have to be some type of union if it's going to work?
I'm disappointed in a way that I set the Heritage Party up in 2020 as something that I think all of those people could have come and joined, and I've said to some of those people that you mentioned, look, you're welcome to come and join us, come and join in, and you can be part of the team. But you've got different people setting up different parties, as you said. There's others that other people are setting up that you haven't mentioned. But I think that I can work with people, I can work with other people and, make, I think, some kind of arrangements to stand in different constituencies. I'd be happy to do that if people had the same principles as we do in the Heritage Party. But if they do have the same principles, I would say, why not come and join us anyway? Because, at the moment, there are local elections going on right now, and we exist, and we're standing a couple of dozen candidates around the country. We have been consistently in the top 10 of political parties in the UK by the number of candidates we're standing in elections for 3 or 4 years now. So we are a force which can have select candidates, stand candidates, and parties that don't even exist yet, that haven't been registered with the Electoral Commission, can't do that yet. So if you're looking for something that exists right now, that is standing now, that can stand in by-elections over the next year, and if there's an early general election, if something does happen to Keir Starmer and there is an early general election, then we're here and we're ready to go. if another party is not registered with the Electoral Commission, they can't stand. So I would, say, have a look at us now. And I'm happy to talk to any of those people you mentioned about working together.
Yeah, I think there is going to have to be some sort of arrangement on the right, but God knows where that plays out. My position at the moment is that what we have to do is shift the Overton window. That's what's required, because actually it's so long until the next general election. Let's move the policies, because the vast majority of the British public agree with mass deportations, for example. So if we have Nigel Farage as the leader of Reform UK say mass deportations are impossible, we've got to move him to a point where he says, no, actually, we can do mass deportations. Trump's done mass deportations. And I think that could happen through a whole load of pressure from parties like Heritage on the right, pressure from the independent media like us here at Outspoken, and also pressure potentially from a Conservative Party leader like Robert Jenrick, who I think will end up outflanking Reform on the right. So it's too early. That's the point. It's too early. But to be very clear, by the way, to all of the people who think I'm somehow turning on Reform, if I was voting in the local elections next week, I would be voting for Reform UK. That doesn't mean that there shouldn't be scrutiny on where this party is going, because we don't want Tory 2.0. Didn't work first time around, and so we need something better in order to save the country. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source, and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.